Welcome, everyone, to Heroes of Gaming, the podcast channel that talks with the people who make the games we love. This week, our hero has a black belt in Judo, a black sash in Kung Fu, 7-star praying mantis, and Wushu. An ass-kicking grandmaster and forefather of video game motion capture. A pioneer in live-action fighting game history. Mortal Kombat's original co-creator, as well as the original performer for Reptile, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Noob Saibot, Smoke, and of course, everyone's favorite movie star, Johnny Cage. He is Master Daniel Pesina. Master Pesina, thank you so much for being here.
On this snowy Sub-Zero day.
That's for sure. When you first set out to make a fighting game that would eventually become Mortal Kombat, did you want to get into video games or be a video game maker?
No, actually, I didn't really have any plans as far as being specific. One thing is, I grew up practicing and loving martial arts, and also through my brother, I have two older brothers, and through my oldest brother, I became a lover of comic books and video games. So with that geeky side, I kind of, for me, joined them together, martial arts and this love of comic books, anime, and all things geekiness. So that's how my journey began. Because the crowd that I would hang out with was sure martial art guys, but also like my younger brother had a group of friends who loved doing comic books. I recall on several occasions them sitting down at my mom's kitchen table drawing together, or going to a friend's house and they were sitting around and drawing together. And they introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons. We used to play Dungeons and Dragons together. So I loved all that stuff. And in that group were a lot of the people you see in who are related to Mortal Kombat today.
You know, the combination of all these elements together really just make just a fantastic universe. Its own world.
We've heard this amazing story. You and Tony were talking about you played ninja at midnight. When you were kids, you'd run around and throw balls of flour at each other, like a ninja star. When you were doing that, at that point where you were like, someday, I don't know how, I'm going to be a real fighting
ninja. Yeah.
I'm going to throw fireballs.
Throwing fireballs, yeah.
No, actually, no. But, that group started out with our basic group. It's really funny. Our basic group. My parents own a home by a park. It's McKinley Park. So we are like literally 2 houses away from this big park. It's a mile square. It's big. It's in the city of Chicago. So at about midnight, we would meet in my mom and dad's garage. And at the beginning, it was myself, like Rich DeVizio, Kano, naturally my brother Raiden, Kung Lao. I think Liu Kang was there a couple of times. One of the guys who put together this group of creative people. He really wanted to cross realms and create a creative group. Andy Kadalka. Later on, Andy would go on to draw the artwork for Nintendo, for the Nintendo original Mortal Kombat, for that booklet. And also he is he's the one who introduced me to Tobias. He was one of them. So John was also would be there. So we would all get together, and it started out like a 10. But I recall that one night I go to my garage and I see all these guys smoking a cigarette, and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "What's up?" And I walk into my parents' garage, and literally there's 50 people in there. And there's about 20 people outside the garage. Wow. So by the time we got to the park, I would say we had 80 people. 80 people. And there were DJs, there were break dancers, there were like regular artists, drawing artists, there's sculptors, there's us as martial artists. We would just all be like together playing this game of ninja at like 1:00 in the morning, because it's the old days. They would shut off all the lights in the park. So we were all dressed in black running around. My dad had these, at the beginning, my dad had these, because we were middle income. My dad was a machinist for International Harvester. So he would fix the house, and he had a couple bags of cement, like the powdered cement. So at the beginning, that's how we started making the balls, is out of powdered cement, because it would leave a white mark on your on your thing. But later on, we ran out of that. We moved to flour, but that's how like it was. It was like a lot of these guys, like, you know, in Chicago, if you heard of Jesse De La Pena, he was one of the guys. He's a famous DJ here in the Chicagoland area. He was one of the guys who used to come out and play this ninja game with us. So there is really, you know, man, I forget some of the guys. I think one of the guys went on to start like a record company, Trax Record or something like that. Anyway, so it was way back in the day. So that this is how like that whole doing this, but hanging out with like a creative people, you know, always thinking of ideas or watching movies and say, hey, that's cool that they did this, but it would be cool if we can also do this, or, you know, add to the story, or add to whatever we were doing.
That's so wonderful. And when you set your mind to create a video game, you didn't know many programmers. How did you come up with this motion capture idea?
Actually, John Tobias, you know, I just finished doing stunts for a movie, martial arts stunts for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze.
Awesome.
We got back about 3 or 4 months later, and John calls my parents' house. And basically, when I'm talking to him on the phone, we're catching up. Hey, he's like, congratulations on the movie. It looks cool. He's like, I have this idea. And he's just, remember when we were younger and I wanted to make that martial art movie. And it's a kind of a story. We went to make this martial art movie into the woods, like a guerrilla style. We were just going to pick a place to film, and John was going to just direct a martial art movie for his class in school. But what happens is a car hit us, almost killed Kano, totaled the car, out of that thing, you know, hanging out for 3 or 4 hours on the side of the road with John, and we just talk about stuff and cool stuff and how, we're going to redo this movie. But anyway, years later, he calls me up. Remember when we did that project? And I was like, yeah, that would have been a cool project. And he goes, I want to do a fighting game with live people. He goes, I just came off a game that I had like a lot of blood in, stuff like that. And that's one of the things I want to add to this game, is having blood to this game. He's like, what do you think? Can you help me with this? And then I was like, man, it sounds really, really cool. And he's like, whatever you think you want in the game, I'm gonna put in the game for if you guys help me. And I was like, okay, what do we do? And he goes, first thing you do is, you know, come to my work late at night, because I don't want anybody to know about my idea until I make the presentation. So we showed up at Midway, myself. He was like, bring Carlos and Rich so we have more, you know, so you can put some fight scenes together. So we show up, and John shows us around the place, and we're playing video games there, because naturally it's Midway Games. They have tons of videos. I love Defender like crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going around, and John had some drawings, and then I put together some fight scenes with myself and Carlos and Rich, and then we made this videotape for him to make a presentation for the game. So that's originally how the beginning part started, and then within 2 weeks, he calls me up and he's like, hey, they like the idea of a fighting game, and they want to hear more about it. He goes, so this is a chance for us to really doing it. At the beginning when we were doing it, John was like, it's going to be a really small amount of games we're going to make. We're going to make 200 arcade cabinets, basically.
Oh, wow.
You know, so it's not going to be a big game, but that's why since it's so small and it's going to be one of its kind, that's why he was like, that's why, you know, you need your help creating it, because you guys know martial arts and fighting, you know, and I'm an artist, and I have a good concept of characters that I want to put in. So we met. I didn't even pay attention, but I met with Ed Boon. Ed Boon was like, we went out to lunch, and Ed just heard us talk about the story, you know, about what we wanted in the game. Like originally, John wanted like Japanese ninjas, and I was like, John, we got to change the ninjas to the Lin Kuei, and he's like, what is that? And then so I told him the whole story of the Lin Kuei. I was like, it's unique, nobody's ever heard of it. It will add this mystery to the game. It'll make a good like story, because nobody's heard of the Lin Kuei or, you know, the Chinese Bhagavan ninjas, and it'll be so cool. I go, they don't dress like the Japanese version. They kind of dress like, they actually dress like this guy. They can't see.
Scorpion.
Yeah, Scorpion. For those of you who can't see, yeah, he just shows a statue of Scorpion.
Yeah, it's like, but all black, because naturally, when you're a ninja, you can't really have bright colors. But John was the one who did add the color to like my idea, like of the Lin Kuei. He's like, that way when we're doing the moves, you can actually see the character better. And so we changed the Japanese ninjas into the Lin Kuei, and originally the Michael Grimm character was modeled after Daniel Rad. So when the meeting was done, I was like, I was like, okay, when were we gonna hear some news about this? And John was like, I'll get back to you. When I looked at Ed, I was like, Ed, what do you think? And I really didn't say anything during the meeting, but he just kind of tightened his lip, and I was like, oh, this guy's not keen on the idea. I just felt like he couldn't see the vision yet. You know what I mean? Because some people are creative different ways. Some people have, can have different ways of imagining anything, or different ways of where they get that spark. But then, then about 2 weeks later, a week later, John calls me up and says, our game is canceled. He goes, they like the idea of a fighting game, but they're going to go with doing a fighting game with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And then I was just like so heartbroken. I was like, John, you cannot use the Lin Kuei in that video game, because that's my idea. I don't want it to come out in somebody else's game. I want to be the first one to have that legend, that myth of the Lin Kuei in a video.
Do you think at that point they kind of took your idea for the live video of a character fighting, or you hadn't gotten to that mechanic yet?
I would say, in my opinion, because of several things, and the major thing is, if they had an idea for a fighting video game, then why did I have to make a demo tape of fighting video game?
An excellent point.
If Midway already had this Jean-Claude Van Damme idea, I know because the company wants to protect their IP and the stuff like that, and I know why they have their story, and it's a long go. But my thing is, why would you have me do that? Why do you have to have me doing forms, and then doing martial art moves, and then setting up fight if you already had the idea for a fighting game? That doesn't make any sense.
It does.
But John explained it to me. He's like, you know what? They're going to go with a mainstream idea because they can make more quarters. And he goes, and with a video game, arcade game, it's all about the quarters. And he goes, so they're going to do that. And I was like, and he's like, you know what? He goes, if things go well, he goes, you want to get beat up by Jean-Claude Van Damme? And I was just like, John, you're going to have to pay me a lot of money for that. And he started laughing. He started just laughing about it. So we joked around about it. But then, about 2-3 months later, I get the phone call, not exact quotes, but this is kind of what he said. He's like, hey, can you still help me with the game? And I was like, yeah, what happened? And he goes, the company found out that Jean-Claude Van Damme actually wants money to make a game.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So they can't come to agreement, so that it's canceled. They can't afford to pay him to do the game. And he's like, go back to our original idea of 200 games. And so I was like, okay. No, they were like, okay, come in. So we came in. I was like, okay, what do we do? He's like, well, we have to create a pathway to the game. You need to come in. It's just going to be you and I. We're going to be in a room. We're just going to film martial art moves and figure out how to make this game, because it's a different concept than a movie. And so I was like, okay. I was like, I could do that. He's like, just bring in sweats, show up, and we're going to just film martial art moves. So I showed up. We go where we're going to film, and it's like a storage room. There's really no place to film anything. He calls Ed up. He's like, hey, we can't work in this space. So Ed comes in, and I meet Ed again. I'm like, oh yeah. And then I was like, Ed, is there any way you can make 201 games and give me a game? And then Ed's like, you know how expensive they are? They're like $5,000. Give you a game. And I was like, well, how about if you give me a game, I'll let you make as many games as you want. And then Ed is like, he's like, no, we're only making 200 games and that's it. So I wish you could do it. He goes, I could probably see if I can get a cheaper rate for you to buy a game. And I'm like, nah, there's no way I'm going to be able to afford like $3,000 or $4,000.
Right.
So I was just like, okay, I understand. We're going to do 200 games, but we're going to make it. So I was just like, man, we're going to make it so kick ass because we, as a group, we were always so like competitive and creative on ideas. So basically, John and I were in a room for 5 or 6 days, 8 hours a day, trying to figure out how to create Mortal Kombat.
Wow.
It was a lot more than just, there was like so many obstacles. We filmed 2 days in a row for 8 hours. And then on the third day, John comes in and says, we can't use any of that footage. I was like, what happened? And he goes, when you're closer to the camera, you're bigger. When you're further away, you're smaller. So you have to kick in the same place. And I was like, John, that's really, really difficult, because we talked about it. And I was like, can I mark the floor? And he's like, okay. He's like, you mark the floor, what you need on the floor, and I'll mark the tripod of the camera. So I started. So if you look at behind the scene footage, eventually you'll see a box on the floor with lines and stuff. And basically, that's something that I had a major part in creating, like distances and coming up. After I made like little marks on the floor, John was like, let's make them bigger in case another character needs a bigger footing. And I was like, okay. So we made that, and I was like, how far can I move forward this way or this way? Let's mark it. So that way I could look down without moving my head and see how far we can go before the light changes. Because again, with the first character, we didn't have a name yet. Johnny Cage character. The name of the character was Danny.
Right, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of like played with it a little bit, and we come back the next day to film, and somebody had taken up the tape.
Oh. No. Like a janitor or something? That's ridiculous.
So all that tape we had down from that day. So now we're 3 days into it, and we don't really have anything. But we were already talking and changing ideas and looking at concepts. From a short, I know people can't see it, but we had because I'm a martial artist, I know how to throw an uppercut. And so when I looked at it, John was like, you can barely see that. And I was like, yeah, well, you're fighting close. You can't have a big uppercut because the guy will see it. And he's like, can you make it bigger? So all of a sudden making this uppercut bigger and just different ways across my face, up, over, we would do one move like 30 times and then take a look at it and do it again, like in a different way, another 30 times. So we were literally, changing the way the fist looked, like from vertical, we turn it a little bit, we turn a little bit more, we turn a little bit more, we turn all the way over. So you're doing every little thing 30 times.
Wow.
Literally, we're doing each bunch of stuff hundreds of times, just looking at it in the video. And John would be like, I like that, and I don't like that. What do you think of this? How do you change that? What do you know? We were doing palms, we were doing, eagle claw, dragon claw, tiger claw, crane beak. We were doing the praying mantis. We were trying to do everything, like different kicks.
Faster.
Yeah. So at the end of that day, we redid it. And then John's like, I'm going to take a look at this. I'll call you back. And so we met a few days later for the fourth day. And John is like, take a look at it. So we get there, and somebody had taken the tape off again.
What? Oh my God. Come on. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it happened times in a row.
Oh.
John was really mad. He's like, I'm going to call Ed. And then he was like, Ed's kind of the boss of the game. He was like, I'm the one who created this, but Ed is the boss of the project, And he's like, let's redo this. And he goes, don't worry. At the end of the day, I'll call Ed up and he'll buy you. He's the one with the company card. He'll buy you dinner for doing all this stuff all over again. So on the fourth day, we finally got to really start doing, getting into the nitty gritty and looking at the game and trying to create a game. Because again, we didn't have all the lighting set up like we did, like with Liu Kang was the last one we really completed. So we had a lot more lighting. So I couldn't one of the problems, jumping, the top of my head would get darker because I was blacking out. So John was just like, dude, don't jump so high. And so I started jump. Okay, I'll just jump a little bit. He's like, and then I did a few of those, and he's like, but you have to tuck your legs. John, how do I jump an inch and tuck my legs? You want me to float? And John started laughing. And he's like, just do the best you can. So then I was like, man, I looked around the room and I saw the staircase. And I was like, John, what if we get me like jumping up in the air? Because when you film somebody jumping, you get the dynamics are a little bit. Then somebody just standing there and jump. I didn't want it to look like dead. So I was like, film me jumping and then film me tucked on the box, like with the jumping posture. And then you could take you could take the last part of how I land and just kind of do that. Can we do that? And John's like, man, that's a really good idea. So we tried that, and even today, like when I see behind the scenes footage of Mortal Kombat, filming of 11, I see a staircase in the back, and I started laughing because I came up with that idea of doing that because later on I was just like that staircase. When we shoot different actors, these different guys coming in to help create their characters, we can put them in different positions so everybody doesn't look the same. So everybody do the kick a little bit different because, with the way we're making the game, it's important for their personalities to come out, as opposed to they look kicking the same.
So that's so great. That's the storyteller in you that's able to translate and discern, where they hail from, where they come from, what their emotion is when they're fighting. I love that. That is, and that all bleeds through. It all bleeds through when you see it. That's beautiful.
And too, I think that's why, like when I talk about it, it never gets old, and there's all these stories that people have not heard of why those moves are created, or what's behind there, that, how goofy we were making them, the geeky side of us, there's so many stories going on there. But on this, like the 5th or 6th day after we were done filming, John was like, I think we have something. Let's invite Ed in, who's the programmer, who will tell us how to shape these movements to put them in the game. He goes, because John was like, there's hitboxes, and if you're going to have different reactions to it, but I'm going to have Ed explain it to you, because otherwise, that way we can really move quickly on making this game, because we only had 8 months to do the whole game. Wow. And in the end, Johnny Cage took like 3 months. It took a lot, because we're always adjusting everything and learning from that character. So that's why often I say Johnny Cage is the father of all characters, because he is the one who did all the work to create all the other characters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Over that timeline of 8 months, how often were they bringing you in?
There was always, even to the end, we were shooting up to the last minute, because we would be coming up with ideas. When I see some ideas from the present game, I was like, oh, we had that idea for the first game. We wanted, an example is like, I've seen Johnny Cage as a fatality where he punches a hole in somebody's skull, which actually my first fatality. John was like, when we were goofing around and doing this stuff, John was like, man, he's like, doesn't it seem odd that we're fighting and then in the end, there's like the character just falls on the floor like dead? and then I'm like, yeah. He goes, isn't it like in the Kung Fu movies, they have a final blow? He goes, we got to think of a way to finish him. We got to think of a finishing move. And then I was like, okay. And then I was like, how about if I jump up in the air and punch a hole in somebody's skull, and they punch the camera, and they got a hole in their skull. And that was the first ever fatality. But I know recently they have it as a fatality, but that is the first one like that I thought of ever. Wow. And he's like, well, let's film it. And he's like, man, that's a little complicated, because again, we didn't have Photoshop or anything. So a lot of movement and storage. Like my phone has more memory than that arcade, cabinet.
That's true.
So he was like, think of something else. So I was like, oh, it would be cool if the guy you beat this guy so much, he falls on his knees, and then I just brutally just pummel him. And then, so when I look at brutalities, I'm like, oh, that's what we thought in the first game. Like tag teams. We thought of tag teams in first game. John wanted 3 fatalities in the first game. We wanted secret tag teams where if you're fighting and you knew how to control it, all of a sudden another character would jump out and you're trying to fight 2 characters at once. So
my goodness.
Incredible.
Yeah, all these stuff in the first game that, and 2, when somebody else would come up with a move, we'd be like, oh crap, we forgot to film something for that. We got to have these in. And then we would always be trying to one up each other. because it's not like there was no like script for characters or anything like that. John was just like, he was a really, create by the seat of your pants type of guy. Even though he was really organized, we could adapt and make stories up like that. Like we were just interacting, and all of a sudden, he'd take what we had, and then okay, that's cool. Let's do that. Oh yeah, let's do this. Do this. Like like John was like, we need an intro. Come out like a Hollywood actor guy, fashioned after Daniel Rad, who was like this pompous guy. So he's this movie star guy. So he was like, oh, you're going to come out like that. And so come out like you're a movie star. And so I was like, okay, well, you know what? And so I started walking out and I just started waving. And he filmed that for a while. And John was like, that's pretty cool. And I was like, wait a minute. And so I was like, I had the sunglasses on. And so I was like, wait a minute. So I put the sunglasses behind me and I walk out and I'm waving like this and I'm blowing kisses and I'm making muscle. And then I pulled, I have the sunglasses and I throw them off and then I hit this fighting stance. And then, John was like, oh my God, that's so cool.
It is. It's so cool. Yeah.
Ed was like, oh my God, that's so cool. We need to use that. We need to have that. So a lot of stuff that we're doing, there's just that creative side where we're just building on it, So what people see now as the making of is probably not even a 100th of what we filmed.
Wow. And did you know while you were doing it, you were making history? Like, did you know that like every day that you're putting time in, you're like, wow, I've never seen this before in anything. We're creating the next thing.
No, because we're doing 200 arcade cabinets.
Right.
That was the promise. That's the promise.
Wow.
That is that's the basic reason why after 2, I just quit. It wasn't what we agreed upon. Just because I didn't have it in writing doesn't mean that, and I understand it. I understand it, though I don't like it. Big business, big business. They'll cut the little guy out. They don't care. They're not there for the creation. They don't really know. Other people too will be quiet about it. More glory for them or whatever. But so much of this stuff. So people, it's a good lesson too to hear this, because that no matter what, when you create something, you need to get protection. Even if you make it with a friend, you need to have protection, because some people might come in and sees it, and then you're out in the street. Wow.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're such a man of honor and integrity. I just think that you're just a wonderful example for everyone to follow, and those lessons are really taken to heart. I know, especially people that are out there that are trying to do their own things, or doing that whole garage setup stuff. I mean, that's starting fresh, starting new. Those are great things for them to hear.
You had this amazing book called Skills of the Vagabonds, and I know there's a story John Tobias wanted to get it from you. Buy your own copy. You're not going to take mine. Yeah. And it's a fantasy comic manual of ruthless martial artists, like underground fighters that also train in black magic, fireballs, etc.
Yeah.
Was that kind of the beginning inspiration for everything that we see in the Mortal Kombat world?
Yeah, actually the book was written, and one of the guys that we played ninja with introduced me to that book back in the day. One of the guys that back in the day when they were running through the park, he was like, one time he came in dressed a little weird. I was like, what? I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. He made his own like Lin Kuei outfit, basically. Not as complicated as what you see today. We were dressing up in black long sleeve t-shirts and black pants.
Yeah.
He actually had like a vest, and I was like, wow. And he's like, he goes, I'm surprised you don't know it. He was like, there's this book that I found, Black Magic and stuff like that, about the Lin Kuei. And he is actually the one who introduced me to the book, and years later, I was always thinking about like just that. And so when I told John about it, I was like, man, it would make a good fantasy background, because we wanted this to be more of a fantasy game rather than a fighting game. Not really anything was planned, but different pieces of your life come into play into something, into your creation. Example, when John was like, we got to throw a fireball. And I was like, well, you can't really throw a fireball because no human can really do that, throw just a fireball, but there's alchemy, So what I want, what Johnny Cage does is take alchemy out of his 9-demon bag, which I got from Big Trouble in Little China, and he wings it at you.
Yeah.
So so each character, like when wasn't really, you just shoot a fireball. There was actually, Sub-Zero had this long thing where he holds his hand above his head and he pulls air into the center of his body, and then he shapes the ice, and then he throws the ice. So that is not just like, just like a casual.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, that's not just a casual thing. We have actually film of him doing that we thought we were going to use, but it was never used because of memory. But it was complicated. There's more complication or creativeness into different things.
What's behind Raiden?
Actually, John wanted Raiden to be the Japanese god of thunder. Carlos really wanted the guy from Big Trouble in Little China. So when people see that, even though John in an interview was he's like, that's how he created it, was the Japanese god of thunder. But because Carlos helped create it, he made things from the Big Trouble in Little China. That crossover, like the people are like, it looks like that. The bands on Carlos's legs. He wanted to add that to the costume because he used to break dance. So he used to carry them in order to break dance. So he put them on Raiden's costume. And it added, when you see Raiden's costume and you see the bottom, how it tapers in, those are Carlos's bands from breakdancing. So
that is crazy. That is amazing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Is there a story behind Kano's belt?
Kano is a Japanese and American mercenary. I don't know why they do an Australian Kano, which is not, I guess that's movie Kano.
Yeah. Right.
Australian Kano is like fake Kano. Whenever I see it, I'm just like, didn't the guy read the manual in the first, the little booklet in the first game? It says he's an American Japanese mercenary. But I remember when John was like, hey, I got to pick up Rich and we're going to go to the surplus shop and try to get some stuff to make him look like a mercenary. Rich and John spent the day roaming around looking at mercenary stuff, going to look at, trying to figure out what kind of look to give Kano's, how to make his cybernetic head. Mm. So just that was just what they found in a surplus store. It was heavy. It was actually from a World War II belt. So it was freaking heavy.
Wow.
So.
Oh, wow.
It looks like a garage door opener in the center of the belt. It's like, did they add the light, or did that light up?
Oh, no. It is.
No, there was no such thing as that back then. You didn't get carpet for that stuff. It's it's 1990. I remember we tried to spirit glue that mask on Rich's face, and it wouldn't stay on. And so Rich was like, "We got to glue it." So we got red model glue and glued it to his face. And at the end of the day, he lost skin.
Oh my God.
But in order
it worth it?
Yes. You tell me.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
We were doing everything for the game. And two, it was a different time. Right now, I know the project lead, in any game says yes or no to any idea. But back then, Tobias would just, whatever was the best idea, he'd grab it. He'd be like, that's a better idea. We're going to do that. That's a better idea. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. He'd be all the time. He'd be like, hey, do something cool. Think of something cool. And I'd be like, okay, what if we do this? Or, we filmed falls for like 40 minutes, 50 minutes falling. I was looking at it. I was like, I don't like that fall. I don't like this fall. I don't like this knockdown. And finally I was like, oh, why don't we use like a jump back instead of a fall? And John's like, what? And so the first time I did it on concrete, what you see in the game where you get hit and you fly back on the ground, like boom. And John was like, oh, that's cool. And then, and that's the way everyone falls. because that was just with the 2D and the limitation of technology, everybody falls like that because after 40 minutes, I was not happy with the way it looked. I was like, nah, you can't really tell what's going on. You can't just fall over,
Yeah.
We had like, at the beginning, we filmed like reactions. Oh, if you barely get hit and you kind of like just chuckle it off, you get hit and your head pops. You get hit harder, your head pops. You get hit harder and it knocks you way back. You get really hard and it knocks you off your feet. So we filmed all that stuff, and later on we just couldn't do all those reactions in the game. But that's how like the process was. Oh, that's cool. Let's do that. So in the end, of creating the game, John was like, he goes, there's so much. He goes, you know what to do? Do a move 3 times and then change it, and I'll just keep filming.
Wow.
And so that's what we would do. Is I could film it 3 times and I'd change it some way. So it was really like I said, John was really, really great at just seeing stuff going and things like that.
And really knowing what is good, like knowing what to keep, knowing what to redo, having that ability to say that's a better idea. I mean, that's a wonderfully collaborative person. Some people in charge, they don't they only take their ideas. So that's really wonderful that the collaboration between you guys was so strong.
Yeah, and that was the thing. He'd like, oh, I like that, and then I was like, oh, you like this? Let's tune it up. And so I would make it even crazier, or you know what I mean? I'd get like, oh, let's do that. When you get hit one time, I flew back, and he's like, oh, that's cool. So I did that a few times, and like, well, what happens if I backpedal when I go back and my arms go like this? And he's like, oh man, that's even better. So in the end, it was just that collaboration, that like, oh, I like that, and then it was my thing to figure out how to make it, sell it more.
You're listening to Heroes of Gaming, and the end of part 1 of our 2-part series, with the video game pioneer who co-created Mortal Kombat and a master of martial arts, Master Daniel Pesina. This completes
Round 1.
Stay tuned for
Round 2.